Good evening all, and welcome. Before the video begins, super quick announcement time. Number 1, I'd like to do the 1000 comment challenge. Let's get this video to 1000 comments. Drop your comments quick smart during the video, pausing the video and dropping them whenever you want. Just let's try and hit 1000 comments. Let's see if we can do it. I'd really like to hit that milestone one more time. Oh, and also, we have a Discord server. Did you know? Why not join? Link in the description. It's super fun and we have so much to do and talk about. And even more if you join. But anyway, for now guys, it's time for you to get comfortable. Tuck yourself into bed. Or ask the convenient creepy arm underneath your bed to do it for you. So get ready to let the darkness take control. I grew up on the outskirts of a large city in the UK. My parents' relationship was never as stable as I would have liked, but I got used to it pretty quickly. I was an only child. My parents had tried for many years to conceive a sibling, but alas, were unsuccessful. I don't know the ins and outs of it, truth be told, but I do believe this played a part in the deterioration of their marriage and eventual separation. When I was about 8, we had a lodger, someone who stayed in our home. We lived on the top floor of the house, and there were 3 rooms on the middle floor, each occupied by different people. They'd use the communal kitchen downstairs and living facilities, albeit not that often. But for the most part, I'd hardly ever see them. Being a young girl, I wasn't really interested in getting to know them anyway. I was more busy playing with my Barbies and going out with my friends and having sleepovers and stuff like that. Anyway, it was around this time that my father started travelling a lot more for work. He worked for a big company and was often required to travel overseas for several days at a time in order to secure financial contracts with other businesses, I guess. This meant my mother was at liberty to see the other men that she was flirting with, and on several occasions, I'm sure, slept with. It was on one of these days that my mother was getting her makeup ready. She was preparing herself and had a beautiful dress laid out on the bed. It must have been no later than 7 o'clock. Being fairly young, my bedtime was around 8:30. So I assumed my mother thought that she was going to put me to bed that night, and then go off into the night and party it out with whoever she was going to see. I knew what my mother was up to. I wasn't a fool, but I was scared of telling my dad, because even though they weren't that happy, I loved my little family unit, and I really didn't want to see it disappear like my aunts had. Anyway, I got ready for bed that night. My mother started reading me a story, but I wasn't tired. I was getting really pissed off. I felt like my mother didn't want to even spend time with me or try and put me to sleep. As she read the book, a note, she picked one of the shortest ones to read. She kept glancing at her watch in desperation, as if time were of the very essence and she were eager to leave as soon as possible. I picked up on this fairly quickly, and a few pages in I just turned to her and said, "It's okay, Mum. I think I want to finish it myself tonight." She looked down at me with an unbelievable smile and said, "Oh sweetie, that's so lovely, thank you," or something like that, kissed me goodnight and told me that she'd see me in the morning. She quietly closed my door, peeking her head through one final time before closing it the whole way, and I was left there in the dark, with only my lamp next to me illuminating my small bedroom. Just for a little bit of context, this room was by no means big. I had a fairly regular bed, with enough space underneath it to store books and boxes and stuff. The walls were pink and purple, with floral decorations, and I had a corner full of stuffed animals. I tried reading the book, and listened as I heard my mother descend both stairs and close the front door. She was about as subtle as a bomb in doing so. I heard the car start and her drive away. I knew she was up to her antics. And you know what? Probably. So did the lodgers as well. They just chose to say nothing to my father. He'd left about 3 days ago. I don't know where, and I didn't know when he would return. I never did. Point being, I was alone in my little room, trying to read to myself and swallow a cocktail of mixed emotions surging through me, knowing full well my mother shouldn't be doing what she was doing, and feeling sorry for my father, as well as a whole load of other issues. So, as I said before, there I was lying in bed. I decided the best course of action, despite not being sleepy, would be to sleep at this juncture, because there was nothing else to do. I turned off my lamp and put the book down right next to me on the bedside table. I tossed and turned for a little while, but just couldn't get to sleep, and opted to lie there and stare out of my window into the night. A single solitary street lamp in the distance glowed a dim orange, and I found myself just concentrating on it as I heard the gentle pitter-patter of rain fall around the house. I was lost in my thoughts when all of a sudden my world was shaken. Something was under the bed. Only in the silence of the night did I hone in on the sound. There was someone moving, or something, very quietly and very discreetly, almost like they'd moved. You see, my room had wooden floorboards, and they would creak and squeak with only the slightest provocation necessary, and there was definitely something causing a sound. At first I thought it was a monster. Remember, I'm a kid. So I pulled my covers higher and didn't say a word. I was waiting for perhaps another 5 minutes when another sound, this time more pronounced, presented itself. It was a loud, long creak. Someone was definitely moving. I think my heart skipped several beats as I lay in the dark, rain all around me, unsure what to do. I tried closing my eyes and telling myself I was imagining it, but I wasn't. No sooner had I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep, did a noise, much louder than the last two, start coming from under the bed. There was a person, and I could hear them slowly dragging themselves across the wooden floor. It was painful to listen to. With each silent strain to try and exit from underneath my small child's bed, did fear erupt within me. I heard this person drawing nearer, and when they were finally out, they let out a very low breath. The kind that you make when you finished a run, but it was just one, and very quiet. I dared not look. I heard this person rise to their feet, and then nothing. I tossed and turned a bit to see if the person would leave my room, or what they would do, but I don't think they moved, as I didn't hear a sound from the floor. That's when I decided whilst looking in their direction, that I would slowly and ever so quietly open my eyes just a tiny bit to see who it was, in the hopes that I wouldn't be found out for not being asleep, and in my mind would be less likely to hurt me. So I tried. I slowly opened my eyelids, just enough to be able to see them. I don't think they noticed me, but I hadn't opened them enough yet in order to have a clear view. When I managed to open them to the point where I could see, did my heart not feel so bad? It was the guy who lived downstairs. It was the lodger. I didn't even know what his name was, but he was just standing over the bed extremely creepily, staring at me. The fear that I had before had slowly died down and was now replaced with confusion. Had he come into the wrong room? What was I to do? My younger self decided that this person must have got the wrong room somehow and was under the bed because they forgot. I'm not sure exactly how I justified it to myself, but I was fairly confident that they just didn't know where they were. So, with the best acting possible, I opened my eyes, looked at them. Funnily enough, I didn't think he saw me open my eyes, and said, "Are you okay?" He visibly jumped up and said, and ran out the room. I heard him run down the stairs and open the door, close it, and that was it. I closed my door that night, felt a bit creeped out, and tried to get some sleep. It was about 5 a.m. a few hours later. I had been asleep for a while, and I needed to pee. So I opened my eyes groggily and looked at my room. There he was again, but was standing in the corner in front of my pile of soft, stuffed toys. He was just staring at me, this crazed, maniacal look, and all the thoughts I had earlier of that he had just gotten the wrong room had gone out the window. He was acting very strange and made me feel quite uncomfortable. I told him, "What are you doing? Get out!" And he immediately left the room without another word. As I went to pee, I got up to see if my mum had made it home yet. She hadn't. I wanted to tell her, and I was starting to get worried. Was this guy gonna hurt me because none of my parents were home? I was definitely not feeling good. So a few weeks pass, and my parents are still together, and the lodger is still living downstairs. I think it might be worth noting that he lived directly underneath my bedroom. But anyway, I hadn't told anyone anything yet. My father had come back for about 3 days and had gone again. This was about a week into him being gone, and I, again, was in a strange position where my mother was trying to read rushed before she left for her night out. I hadn't seen much of the lodger for the past 2 weeks, and tried to put the incidents at the back of my mind. I wanted to tell someone, but part of me thought they wouldn't believe me, or would be upset, or that I would cause some discord and it would harm the family, which I desperately did not want to do. Finally, I went to sleep that night. Mother left, and I was alone. It was your standard night of me listening to the rain, trying to fall asleep. This time, I hear it again. The guy is underneath my bed. I know it's him, and I was starting to freak out. Sometimes I go to my parents' bedroom when I had a bad dream, but there were no parents there now, and I think he knew that. I think my mother was so unsubtle, and she didn't care that she'd be leaving her young daughter with 3 potential creepers in the house that not even she knew that well. She trusted them with my life. That really stuck with me for the rest of mine. Anyway, back to me being on the bed and hearing this creep underneath. I start getting scared. I opt to try and stay awake and to make noise so that he didn't come out, no matter what. So I start tossing and turning a bit more and turn on my light and start reading. First out loud and then mumbling to myself as I read, because I was getting very bored, although I was still terrified. I didn't know what to do. I thought that if I left the comfort of the bed, if I get up, he might try and grab my leg. I was so scared. While sitting there, I still heard him underneath. I wasn't sure if he even knew he was making that much noise, or if he thought I were deaf, but I knew he was there. In a moment of panic, I sat up from bed, positioned my legs on the wooden part, and sprang to the door. The moment I hit the floor, did he bolt up from under the bed, pushing the bed, and tried to grab me. I ran down the stairs, and then the next flight of stairs with him hot on my tail, and dived behind the sofa. He was stalking me. He was stalking through the house, looking for me. I could hear him. I could hear the creep skulking around. I didn't know what he wanted to do to me, but I knew that it wasn't good. He started calling my name in the creepiest tone and voice you can imagine. It sent chills down my spine. Any doubts or reservations I had before about telling my parents were out the window. They were going to hear about this, and I was going to scream at my mum for leaving me alone with this creep. Then, a miracle happened. I don't often believe that miracles are true, but on this day, just as he was calling my name, did I hear a car pull into the road. It was a cab. My dad stepped out, got up to the door and opened it. He was running up the stairs. I'm quite confident that by the time he entered, did he hear the door slam upstairs. He saw me, petrified behind the sofa. He ran up to me and asked me what was wrong. I was quiet. I couldn't say anything, and just pointed to the stairs. He gave me a quizzical look, put down his bags, and told me to sit on his knee to explain everything. It took about 20 minutes, but I finally was able to relate what had happened. The first night, and then the second night. Screw it all. I told him all about what Mother had been doing. I was feeling so betrayed, the fact that she'd left me, and thus allowed this guy to creep me out. My dad didn't explode or react the way I expected. He told me none of it was my fault, and he was so sorry that had ever happened in the first place. He gave me a big hug, a kiss on my forehead, and told me it would never happen again. He got his phone out of his pocket, called a number, and within 10 minutes the police were here. I had to explain to the nice police lady what happened, and they went upstairs, fetched the guy, and arrested him. I never saw him again. He was evicted, and I'm not sure, but he may have gone to prison, although I was very young and my dad never did tell me the ins and outs of it, only that he'll be away for a very long time, as he used to say. For anyone interested, my parents' marriage dissolved on that same day. She came home around 6 a.m, and my dad pretty much kicked her out there and then. I was feeling pretty crushed and very uneasy, but I ended up living with my dad. His job were very understanding of the situation, and he got a more fixed position in the city and didn't have to travel anywhere near as much. I think it was only once a year. I ended up living with my dad the entirety of my teenage years until I moved out to go to university. me and my mum still don't get on very well, and I still blame her for the events that transpired over those 2 weeks. Creepy lodger, if you're still out there, I hope we never meet again. And I hope you never had the opportunity to ever get that close to another young girl again. I was 16 and living with my dad. I was getting ready to go to sleep, and suddenly it was like someone sat on the foot of my bed. I felt the weight settle down and the mattress/box spring creak a little. I was laying on my side facing away at the time, so I sort of half sat up and half turned towards the foot of my bed. I could just barely make out the outline of a hunched over shadowy figure sitting there. The moonlight coming through the blinds gave it a weird shimmery effect, almost like The Predator, but with shadows. I just kind of froze, and all the hairs on my body stood on end. Not wanting to disturb whatever it was, I slowly laid back down while keeping my eyes on it. It was facing away from me, and it did not seem to be aware of me, or maybe it just didn't care. After a little while of staring at it, I slowly pulled my covers up over my face and started to silently cry a little bit, because it was just too much. I was more terrified than I have ever been in my life, and my adrenaline was racing. I don't know how long it was, but eventually I felt the weight ease off the bed. I sat there listening for any signs of what was happening, too afraid to peek out of the covers. I'd seen horror movies, and that sounded like a really bad idea at the time. But moments later, a bunch of hangers in my closet jangled, and I ripped off the covers to look, but whatever it was gone. There's more. This house I lived in at the time, sat on what we later heard from neighbours, used to be the site of a huge plantation back in the day. The evidence was this very old graveyard that sat at the edge of the woods in my backyard, clearly visible from my bedroom window. It doesn't have anything to do with the story directly, but it is an interesting little tidbit. I was around the same age, possibly 16, maybe 17. It was late, and I was in my bedroom dicking around on the computer. All night I had this weird feeling that someone was watching me, but numerous looks out the window and into the hall had revealed nothing. After a while I turned my computer off and climbed into bed. The weird feeling of being watched was subsiding, much to my relief. I hadn't been lying there long, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, when all of a sudden, as clear as day, I heard my own name whispered into my ear by a voice that spoke in a harsh whisper, like when you're trying to get someone's attention, but not heard by other people. Cosmos. It scared the crap out of me. That weird feeling of being watched was suddenly back, only this time it was instantly cranked up to 11, as the adrenaline rushed through my system. As soon as I heard the whisper, I sat bolt upright, and then, well, I kind of spazzed out, and it was not dignified. My fight or flight kicked in, and unlike the last time, my body was going with full flight. I flailed off the bed in a panic, and ran into the wall trying to find the door. I probably screamed or yelled, and honestly don't remember, but I was alone in that part of the house, so no one would have heard me. My dad stayed in a room that he built behind the garage. After practically bouncing off the wall, I found the door and flung it open and turned round. I expected the light from the hallway to illuminate whoever had stood over me and whispered in my ear, but I saw no one. I turned on the bedroom light and surveyed the room from the doorway, but still saw nothing. I paced through the rest of the house until the adrenaline rush started to subside, and I succeeded in calming down a little bit The feeling of being watched had gone away at some point, so I went back to my bedroom and looked everywhere a person could hide. I turned on my computer, and nothing else happened that night. This is a story that I have not told to many people in my life, but it's something that I will never forget. When I was around 13 years old, I lived in a house over about 100 years old at the time, and we always knew that there was some type of spiritual activity in the house. My little brother claimed to hear a child crying in the basement, and my sister said there was an old lady in a rocking chair next to her bed that she saw late at night. The old lady wasn't hostile or anything, probably just the spirit of the old lady that passed away in the house a few years back, before we moved in, according to what we researched on the house. About a year before this incident happened, my sister and her friends were messing around with a Ouija board. And safe to say, some crazy things happened that night that I would rather not get into. Fast forward about a year, and I'm about 13 years old. Something that was the beginning of a month-long nightmare for myself. I can never explain the situation, but here it goes. So I was laying in my bed early evening. It was still light outside, and I was just listening to my radio. I was not dozing off. I was wide awake, and I'm just listening to music and enjoying myself, enjoying the quiet in my own room. And all of a sudden something grabbed my ankle and started to pull me towards the foot of the bed. I yanked my foot away, and whatever it was released its grip of me. I froze for a few seconds trying to comprehend what had just happened, and then I went to the foot of the bed to look underneath the sheets. I looked everywhere to make sure it was my little brother not trying to pull a prank on me. There was nothing, so I brushed it off. Perhaps it was just my imagination or something I didn't know. So, within 2 or 3 days of the incident, I started getting the strangest dreams of a face. Not the whole face, just the eyes, and its eyes were closed, and I couldn't tell what it was, but I'd wake up sweating and wasn't sure why. Then a few days after, the eyes opened, and they were red and yellow, evil-looking eyes. I would wake up shaking and sweating even more than before. A few days after, the dreams escalated. I actually got a full look at the face of whatever had been staring at me for the past week, and it was utterly terrifying. The skin on this thing's face was dark, blood red, and veiny. The eyes were yellow laced with red in the irises. It just stared at me, and I can't even tell you how long it was staring at me for, and then I would wake up screaming because of it. A few days after that, the face started smiling at me. I can't even begin to describe the amount of pure terror that I felt. It was just staring and smiling at me with sharp, white teeth. A few days after that, I would picture it on what would look like an operating table, or maybe an emergency room bed. It would sit up, and everything was able to be seen. This entity had long, tall spikes coming out of its head, and its entire body was that red, veiny look, the same from its face, and it would just look at me. I barely slept for that better part of a month. Eventually my imagination took over with the hospital show that I watched on a regular basis, and then my dreams would incorporate that show with the entity, and eventually it faded off, and I was able to sleep. I could never quite explain the chain of events. I don't know if it was stalking me or was trying to possess me, but it failed. I remember clearly after the incident with my sister and her friends playing with the board a year prior, that my grandma came in and blessed the house with holy water. So maybe it couldn't get that far with me, and it just decided to torment me. And then my brain protected itself and was able to go elsewhere. I could never explain this, and to this day I truly believe that there is some evil entity in that house, and I have not been back there since we moved when I was 14. I would love to now go back some 15 years later to investigate, because I believe that house is a hub for spiritual energy, and that there's a demonic energy in there too. I'm not sure why or how, or for what reason it was in that house, because everything else in there didn't seem to be too hostile. That's my story, and if anyone has experienced anything similar, I would love to hear about it. This is something that's been bothering me almost my entire life. I think I was 3 when it happened. To this day, I don't know if it actually happened or not, if it was my imagination or not. I guess needing answers or confirmation that this happened. I don't remember a lot from that time, so I'm leaning on it's real. I think I was 3. We just moved to Ontario from Alberta, renting a duplex in Kingston. It was my grandparents, my uncle, and me. They adopted me at 6 months. Anyway, we all had our own bedrooms. Mine was at the end of the hallway. It was either late spring or summer, and the sun was almost all the way down. Being so young, I was in bed almost asleep. The pinkish orange light from the setting sun was lighting my room up just enough for me to be able to see everything. Anywho, like I said, almost asleep, and all of a sudden something punches me in the arm. It didn't hurt as much as it startled me, but being the curious kid I was, I turned over to look over the side of the bed to see what the heck hit me. Well, shit. If there wasn't this big black arm still bent up as if it was going to hit me again. It was huge, black, and I want to say there were patches of turquoise that were blended into the black. Maybe that wasn't true, but the fingers had no nails, but like claws at the end. I can still picture the exact scene, but the small details of the arm were kind of blotchy. Now to add in what I think this arm meant for me. My life sucks. Not the usual stuck in a rut kind of way, and until my late teens I was really sensitive to the evil side of the paranormal. I think it cursed me. I really do. Everything that was ever good for me ends up very badly without a warning. Maybe some of it is because I now expect the worst to come, and eventually it does. So maybe I sabotage myself. Who knows? Example. My parents, or grandparents, died when I was young. Papa of terminal lung cancer, and Mum when I was 19 from complications from too many strokes and seizures. Every job, good relationship, every good thing in my life has gone to shit. I was pretty much forced to give up my oldest daughter for adoption. I won't get into why. It involves a few things that did happen with her father going insane that got child services involved in the first place. But at the end of it, he hadn't been seen or heard from in months. Now I've got a 6.5-month-old daughter. Her father, I do believe, is my literal soulmate. He reads my thoughts, knows how I'm feeling almost before I know, and can find me no matter where I am without any sort of GPS tracker, and a ton of other unexplainable things in regards to me. We've been together a few times, never lasting more than a year until this time. We had a daughter in November, and everything was amazing. Then all of a sudden he snaps, for no reason known to me, begins yelling at me and our baby, and about getting the services called. They show up, nothing. Someone calls again, and they come. Get this, Friday, April 13th this year, and take her. It was all done wrong, and now they're under fire for not fully investigating the situation. He started drugs, cheated on me, and hasn't seen our baby in a month now. My life was amazing. I was happy, at peace, and feeling very optimistic about our future. Again, there was no slow decline. There never is. Just bam. Life goes crap without much warning. No way I could have seen this coming. Why? We could chalk it up to I either have kids with idiots or I'm lying about the circumstances behind the events I mentioned. I know I'll receive criticism and doubt, and that's fine with me. I should also add that this curse seems to affect anyone who gets too close to me. Generally my partners. They are always going to end up crazy in the end. Again, I could be lying, leaving out important details, or maybe I push them away and gaslight situations and play the victim. I know that is open to discussion. It happens with most of my close friends. I actually feel as if someone invisible, like the Black Plague of destruction and despair, follows me in my wake. There's also another thing I should add that may pertain to all of this. One time I was walking downtown. This woman, who was a known psychic and medium, and everyone knew her as Mama, stopped me as I walked by her. She asked me to sit with her for a minute. She has something she needs to tell me, and I'm about 18 to 19, and I stupidly think to myself, good old crazy Mama, what nonsense does she want to talk about this time? Not expecting at all what she really has to say, she tells me that there is something inside me that isn't good. It isn't right, and it will make me do bad things. That I'm a good person, but bad things are going to happen. Have I not seen them yet? I need to get rid of it before it's too late. Something along the lines of that. At the time it freaked me out, but it didn't really click for a while. My mum died not long after that. I had a miscarriage at 12 weeks, and didn't even know I was pregnant until I was at the hospital for unexplained bleeding. I broke my foot, and lost my job because it required me to stand for hours at a time. All of these things happened within about 2 months, not long after I had that warning from Mama. Since then, I do really good. I think I've got myself all figured out. Then something happens and it all comes crashing down with every tiny warning. I do think I sabotage some of it when I get too comfortable, knowing that it's going to happen anyway. My gut tells me it definitely has something to do with the punch from the demonic arm. When I was 12 or 13, I was one of those kids who loved scary movies. Things that went boom, having my adrenaline pumped. I was definitely not one of those kids who gets freaked out easily. I had 2 pet cats at the time who were all sorts of chill. They weren't the typical cats who'd do creeptastic things like stare into a corner at nothing and run away or anything like that. One night, I woke up at exactly 3 a.m. with this strong sense of terror for no reason. I hadn't been having any nightmares or anything, so I immediately knew something was off. I looked around and caught up with my senses, and realized both my cats were standing on the end of my bed, staring at the same spot on my floor just out of my sight, hissing, spitting, growling, almost like they were facing a terrible foe. The terror in me skyrocketed as I tried to convince myself that I was just overthinking and nothing could possibly be in my room. I had this horrible feeling that something was watching me. There was a thick presence in the room, and I felt like my sympathetic nervous system was going to short out. It was going so strong. At this point, I hadn't looked over the edge of my bed for fear that I was actually gonna see something. It took about 5 minutes of prep, talk, and rationalization to force myself to look. All this time, both my cats are freaking the heck out and look ready to attack at any second. When I finally peer over the edge of the bed, the floor was empty. There wasn't anything there. The feeling of a presence and the fear was still present, but there wasn't so much as a shadow, shape, nor speck of dust. The cats were still locked onto the same spot on the floor, not taking their eyes off it. I quickly covered my head under the blanket and hoped that the feeling would pass. After another 5 minutes or so, my cat slowly settled down and laid on the end of my feet. It took a good few hours for my mind and nervous system to settle down enough for me to sleep. The whole time, I couldn't help but remember reading somewhere that in some cultures cats were considered guardians of the underworld. One of my earliest memories is from when I was younger than school age, in the upstairs bedroom I shared with my younger sister. I remember frantically shoving all of my stuffed animals in the cracks between the bed and the wall, so that the hands would stop feeling around for me as I slept. I remember laying perfectly still as a hand would come up from under my bed, feel around the very edge of my mattress, and then slink back down when it found nothing. My parents, of course, didn't believe me and did nothing. I remember being a preteen, and my sister and I had gotten bunk beds to replace our tiny beds at some point. I slept on the top bunk, with many nights joined in fear by my sister. One evening when she wasn't home, a pure white lady's hand flattened its palm on the very edge of my top bunk. It felt around before quickly vanishing back down into, I assume, the middle of my bedroom. It happened again when I was an adult with a child, still living in the home. Though I have since moved and left that terrifying haunted place, I will forever fear a hand reaching up from beneath my bed. When I was around 8, something weird happened. It was Valentine's Day, just after breakfast. My parents always gave us kids a little something for the holidays. That year, I got a really cute purple dress and a matching ring in the shape of a heart. I went upstairs to change into my new outfit. For some reason, I can't remember why, I decided to change in my parents' bedroom. I went into the little space in between their bed and the wall and put on my new dress. I started to go back downstairs and realized I'd forgotten my ring. I went back up to my parents' bedroom to get it, and under the bed, laying on his side, was a man dressed up in a genie costume. He was motioning for me to come to him. I was terrified and ran downstairs hysterical. My parents couldn't calm me down even when they checked under the bed, and nothing was there. I've never had another experience like this, but I still remember exactly what he looked like and how scary it was. My wife and I were asleep one night, and I woke up suddenly and felt like someone was at the foot of our bed. I opened my eyes and saw a woman standing there at the foot of my bed. She slowly turned towards me and just stared. Not being fully awake yet, my brain couldn't get fully afraid, but was instead curious and confused as to why another person was in the room. I sat up and reached towards the woman, trying to figure out if she was real or not. When her hand reached my face, she disappeared. My wife woke up at this point and asked me what I was doing. All I could say is that I thought I saw something. We both lay back down facing each other and closed our eyes. Not a moment later did we hear this guttural roar/growl that sounded like a mix between a bear, a lion and a howler monkey, emanating from under our bed and behind the headboard. There's nothing behind that wall, since it's outside a second-story wall. she immediately began screaming, and I searched the house from top to bottom. We never found out what made that noise, and it took us a while to sleep in our bedroom again. My sister once said she was getting out of bed one night to use the bathroom and felt something grab her ankle. Not something touch, but actually grasp fully. And if I recall, she saw a hand behind her bed, or something touch her hand. But I remember once we were hanging out in the living room, and one of the windows is 2 stories up, and we hear a bang on it, and look up to see a blue hand. This was midday in the winter, and we run into another room, and it's the same thing. Run to another room, and again, bluish grey hand on the window. Really freaked us out. Every night at 11 PM, I feel these strange bumps under my mattress, and there's never anything under it. It happened on completely different mattresses, and even when I'm not in my own bed, it goes from one corner to the other, and I know I'm not causing it, because I have lain perfectly still and not moved, and have felt the mattress be pushed up, and to go along with that sometimes when a leg is off the bed, and I feel this overwhelming dread that if I don't put my leg up, something horrible will happen to me. I've always been able to see and hear things, and it scares me. So the bed bumper really does. And now I'm feeling something because other people have felt it and it freaked them out. I'm pretty creeped out by it. Any thoughts and suggestions are welcome. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I do hope that you enjoyed tonight's installment of Under the Bed Stories. If you did, don't forget to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. If you're new here, subscribe and press the bell icon for good measure to be updated every time I post with more nightly spooks. If you're new, why not join our Discord server? Or maybe if you just haven't done that already. And don't forget, let's get 1,000 comments. I know you can do it. Every comment counts. I'd really like it. It'd be really cool. Awesome milestone to hit. I hope everyone's doing well. Pandora had her first steps yesterday, which was pretty amazing. But yeah, I hope everyone's doing well and that there's nothing creepy under your bed. Maybe it's worth checking. But for now, guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.